Canva Affinity took the world by storm when they announced that they're making an Adobe Killer completely free. Canva's co-founder and chief product officer, Cameron Adams, said that they have built a business model with Canva that's so successful they were able to support the continuous free development of this new Adobe Killer, and they're calling it Affinity Studio. Affinity Studio is a one-stop shop for designers to create documents, work on illustrations, and edit photos. In Adobe, these three categories are split into three major softwares: InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop. As a person who's used Adobe for the best part of 15 years, I can tell you, making files across multiple software and moving them across, and sometimes getting the red exclamation of death when I accidentally move a linked file on InDesign, that's been outright rage bait. So when I heard about this all new, all-in-one software, I got goosebumps. My breath hitched, and for a moment, I genuinely questioned whether I should be unfaithful to Adobe. But the more that I looked into Affinity Studio, the more it felt like someone has finally listened to every late night rant session every designer has had. Someone actually listened and did something about it. The promise of a seamless transition between pixel, vector, and document work, that thought of being able to edit a visual on the pixel workspace, previously Photoshop, then moving to the vector workspace to work on architectural details or floor plan editing, previously Illustrator, then making a document around all of these visualizations in the layout workspace, previously InDesign, honestly, that was a breath of fresh air that the industry needed for decades. So in this video, we will go through the Affinity software interface and compare it to its Adobe counterparts, and then try to do some random things in random workflows and just understand the differences between them. We will also touch on the paid AI features that Affinity Studio provides. But before we start, and I hate to say this like any irrelevant YouTuber, but 90% of you aren't subscribed. That makes Freddy sad. Look at him and tell him you won't subscribe. I dare you. Opening Affinity Studio for the first time feels like a reunion if you're an existing Adobe user. It feels familiar, but changed a bit. All the toolbars have similar looking shapes, and they do similar things. You can even customize it by pressing the same three dots available on Adobe. And this is how it looks like on Affinity. When you press on the three dots, you get this plethora of tools that you can search between so you don't confuse yourself. On Photoshop, you have the exact same three dots. If you click and hold, you can go to Edit Toolbar, and then you have a lot of tools that you can scroll between. On the right side here, it's a similar story. A color selection palette and a layer section. However, it's here at the top when things start to differ. It says Vector, Pixel, and Layout. These are basically Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign respectively. Switching between them essentially switches software, but without the faff of actually moving from one software to another. Anyway, so let's start a new file. It's a fairly similar story across both software, when the first thing that you're received with is this panel in which prompts you to pick a paper size and some settings here on the right. And these settings on the right include DPI, paper size, orientation, background color, etc. Affinity tries to merge all of the windows you get with the three Adobe software, but on top of that you get more options like drawing scale, which is relevant when you're trying to work with a more technical drawing that you need to import to the right size. For this example, create a landscape A3 with just a white background and 300 DPI, because designers will kill me if I change that. As said, on Photoshop it's a similar story. You basically pick a paper size, and here on the right you can change the paper size and the orientation, the color of the background, and the DPI. So I'm also going to create a landscape A3, and voila, we have the landing page for both Adobe Photoshop and Affinity Canva. Or Canva Affinity? I'll just call it Affinity. Okay, I'm aware that Pixel is second on the top bar and Vector is first, but this is my channel, so I'll do what I want. Sue me. The Pixel workflow, as I mentioned before, is a direct response to Photoshop, meaning if you'd like to touch up images, add figures or things to architectural visuals, this is the place. So let's look at this architectural render and try to add figures, maybe adjust the lighting, and make amendments to the scene. So I'm going to make a start by importing this Mid-Journey generated image. Before you scream at me, click here to know about my thoughts in AI in design. Adam told me it's a good video. Don't ask me who Adam is. Anyway, back to the main point. I can simply import a photo by dragging and dropping that image onto the Affinity canvas. It's a similar story here when we switch to Adobe Photoshop, when we can just drag and drop the image. But Adobe has this extra step that requires you to press enter to be able to import the image fully. Affinity just does it. But the blue box around the image, which you can find in Photoshop by pressing Command and T or Control and T if you're a Windows user, this blue box is there as long as the layer is selected here. So let's do three things with this image. The first thing I want to do is remove the background. The second thing I want to do is add figures or objects. And the third thing I want to do is to kind of change the color of the image. First of all, let's try to remove the background. On Adobe, it's a matter of clicking on the remove background image, which gives you this. Yeah, let's just Command Z out of this one. Luckily, there are alternative ways of doing this. We can, for example, use the object selection tool, and it works well if you're lucky. So I'm going to click and hold and drag to hopefully select the building. And voila, it's recognized the building. If you're stuck in 2001, you can use other tools like Magic Wand or Quick Selection tools, but luckily the object selection tool is working quite well. If you want to add further objects to the image, you can easily click and hold Shift as you click and drag for further objects, and then you can just keep going until you have all the objects that you'd like, or until it tells you that it couldn't find any objects. I'm just going to try to add these little trees and the floor, and I kind of have more or less the objects that I want. For Affinity, removing the background is a paid AI feature, which we will test out at the AI walkthrough chapter. Don't skip. I see you, James. See you. However, and luckily, the object and selection tool works so well for highlighting the building. So let's test them out. For the object selection tool is this little icon here on the left, and it's called object selection tool. And I will click and drag this, and you can see it selected the building. So now I'm pressing and holding Shift, and hopefully it's going to add more objects into my selection. Now on to removing the background itself. On Adobe, it's a matter of clicking this mask tool, and voila, the background is now removed. We can then adjust this removal by using the black brush to remove elements. For example, if I want to remove this, I can just click on the black brush and then click and hold. Or I can use the white brush to keep or add new elements. So now I can bring back these, and let's say, for example, that between these two planters here, I want to bring back the floor. So I can click and hold and click and hold. Voila, I have it. Simple. On Affinity, it's an identical thing, and the icon for the mask is basically identical to that of Adobe. So I'm going to click on that, and again, it's black to remove and white to keep. I can also increase the brush size, the same shortcut, which is the square bracket open or square bracket close, the same one as we had on Adobe. So I'm going to deselect and then try to show more objects, just the same as I've done with Adobe. And now we remove the background the exact same way in both Adobe and Affinity. Okay, so now that we have the background removed, we can move on to adding figures. In Adobe, you can do this by either generating them on Firefly, so I can say people figures and wait for it to generate. Here are the results, which are, by the way, massively a hit or miss. Or you could just drag and drop PNGs and then edit them to the right scale, or you can use custom brushes, and you can find them anywhere online. If you just Google Adobe brushes, just click on Brush Easy, which is one of the better websites for them, and you can just search up whatever you want. So let's say figures, and as you can see, we have thousands of brushes that you can download, and you can open this ABR file by right clicking and opening with and choosing Adobe. It should be Photoshop by default, but Affinity was sneaky in this one, to say the least. So I just opened it with Photoshop, and you can see nothing much happened. But if you go to the brush tool and then click on this folder with an icon on it, you will find that we have our brushes here. And these work the same way as any other brush. So what I'm going to do is click out of this, and I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to make these smaller I'm going to stamp them somewhere around here, potentially. And you can change the color of these figures by just changing the color of your brush. So for example, I just chose this color, and now when I stamp it, it gives me that color. So I'm going to choose a bit of a bright color, or I might use the color picker. So I can just select one of the colors of the building and stamp it here. And now we have figures that work within the atmosphere of the image. Affinity does the exact same thing, as the brushes you'd find online for Adobe also work for Affinity. Sneaky little... You can then choose the brushes that you downloaded that are meant to be for Adobe by going on this little panel that says brushes. And you can click on where it says basic and choose the brushes that you just imported, and here are the exact same brush that we just had on Adobe. Again, I'm going to make this slightly smaller. I'm going to select the color by double clicking here and then using the eyedropper tool to select the color of the building. And before I stamp this brush, I just want to make this bigger. So I'm going to go back to the selection tool and make this slightly bigger. So it kind of more or less centralizes the paper or the page. And now I'm going to go back to the brush tool and I'm going to stamp my figures somewhere around here. So now, as you can see, we have very similar results across Affinity and Photoshop. So now that we have figures, we remove the background and have the stage set up to change the colors up a bit. I'm going to change the background color by adding a layer below this image. In Photoshop, you can do this by just changing the background layer's color, or if you want to make a new layer, you can do it by clicking on this icon on Photoshop. On Affinity, the equivalent icon is this to create a new pixel layer. Going back to Adobe, I have a layer here that I want to fill up with a color. So I'm going to use the command Shift and Backspace. So I'm going to fill the background with the draftish color, which is this shade of yellow. So I'm going to select that and then press OK. And now we have a nice background that has the best shade of yellow behind our building. On Affinity, if I want to do the same thing, I'm going to create a new layer or a new pixel layer. I'm going to move that below the layer that I have the building on. And I'm going to press G to move to the fill tool. I'm going to try to find this flood fill tool. Again, I'm going to select the draftish yellow, which by the way, FDB833 if you are interested, and then press on close. And now I'm going with the bucket tool selected, click, and again, now I have my draftish yellow in the background. Finally, let's change the color of the building up a bit. On Adobe, I should have my building selected, and I'm going to go to layer and then adjustment layer. And then for this example, I'm going to use color balance. We're going to press OK for the name of it. And now I can change up the colors. Notice how, because my background color here is selected as well, so it's basically impacting my building and the background. To fix this, I can press Alt until I get this logo between the two layers. I'm going to click on it, and now this only affects the building. And now when I play around with the colors of the building, the background is not affected. So let's say I want to make the color kind of bluish. So I'm happy with that. Let's see how complicated it is on Affinity. So I'm going to select the layer of the building, and I'm going to go to Pixel, New Adjustment Layer, and you guessed it, Color Balance. And for this one, you can see that when I adjust the colors, it does not impact the background color. So again, I'm going to make it more bluish. I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to exit. For this round, it's pretty much a tie. Both softwares worked very well, and the workflow took more or less the same number of clicks, and the output is nearly identical. Well done Affinity for making a free alternative that works just as well as the big guy. I'm aware that the image has a few gaps in it on the right and the left at this point, but that's fine. You'll see why at the AI walkthrough section. But again, don't skip. Sarah, I see you. Moving on to the second workspace, the vector one. Yes, it's second. Shut up. On Affinity, I will just click on the vector workspace and I'm here. For Adobe, I'll have to first save my file. I'm going to call it Pixel Equivalent. I'm going to close out of Photoshop, search up Illustrator, fire up Illustrator, and then I'm going to click on open, and then I'm going to find my file. Press OK. That was so much more clicks. The first thing that you would notice when you open Illustrator, well, after working on Photoshop, is that not all of your layers are separated. So for example, at this point, the background is pretty much baked onto the image. Anyway, so I want to draw an outline for the building with Illustrator now that we have it open. I'll just select the pen tool. I'm going to go around the building and create this outline. I'm going to match that outline to the floor and then have it go maybe that way. I'm going to use that outline maybe without a fill. So to do that, I'll just click on this little square with a red cross going against it. And I'm going to be happy with this outline for the building. Now, let's try to do the same thing on Affinity. So again, I can use the pen tool, which looks identical to that of Photoshop. I'm going to click on the building itself, maybe start a new pixel layer. What you will find when you start drawing, even if you started a pixel layer, is going to make a new layer for line because that's a vector layer. So I'm going to go around the building again, drawing this outline. And again, I'm going to go no fill. And then for the stroke, Affinity makes it slightly easier to adjust the stroke. So I'm going to make it slightly bigger. I'm going to move this anchor a bit by clicking on this icon for the node tool and adjust my icon. And now I have my outline around the building, the same way I have it on Photoshop, Illustrator. Gosh, so many names today. Anyway, back to Illustrator. I will also draw a circle that goes behind the building somewhere around here. Oh wait, I can't. I will either need to do some work to cut out the shape from the building, or I will have to go back to Photoshop. This is because the background that I made with Photoshop isn't recognized here. So I'll have to go back to Photoshop, remove the background layer, save it, and go back here to make a background on Illustrator. And then I'll have to put the circle between the building and the background. For Affinity, it's a matter of clicking and holding on this rectangle tool and selecting one of their many tools, like the ellipse tool. I'm going to click and hold and drag to make a circle. I'm going to fill up this circle with the draftish olive green, which by the way is 474A2C. I'm going to opt for no stroke this time. And it's just a matter of moving this between the layer of the background and the building. And there we go. We have it. And now if I want to move it around, I can easily just select the circle, make it bigger or smaller, and move it around the building. One thing that I noticed though is that Affinity does not separate between the curvature pen tool and the straight lines pen tool. It's not even available on the more tools section. You can draw curves by clicking and holding and then kind of trying to manipulate your curves, but I feel like Illustrator's curvature tool allows for more controlled curves. So a minor W for Adobe here. In fact, I found that more of the tools that are available in Illustrator are a bit more advanced than those on Affinity. However, I personally won't miss much but the curvature tool. Overall, this is when Affinity really starts to pull ahead. Now that the workflow included opening a new software on Adobe, importing and facing some challenges along the way, even though I'm aware that it's self-inflicted, but it happens. While with Affinity it was all solved locally, I saved myself some time, trouble, and inconvenience using Affinity here. Although I will miss the curvature tool, but Affinity wins this round by a landmile. Okay, we can all agree that this space is the third one. For Affinity, I will click on the layout space. And for Adobe, I will have to save this Illustrator file that, by the way, failed. Save. And then I'm going to need to close Illustrator, search up InDesign, launch that, start a new landscape A3 file, and then drag and drop the pixel equivalent Illustrator file, click and hold, and make it go across the entire page. So let's start with Affinity on this one. Just by clicking on this layout button, we can see that the new panel appears on the left here next to the toolbar, and that has pages and master pages. It's similar to the InDesign layout when if you click on the pages section, you get the pages here and the parent pages here. In fact, most of the tools on the panel look similar to those on InDesign, except make it easier for you to find the table command. Yet, they make it exactly as annoying to add a page number, so you have to go to Text, Insert, Fields, and Page Number. Why? InDesign is not innocent from this either. You have to go to Type, Insert Special Character, because we all know that page numbers are special characters, and then you go to Markers and Current Page Numbers. Why do you hide them under 4 submenus? That's insane. Anyway, tangents aside, let's add a few more pages and then adjust the master pages. So on Affinity, I can add new pages by clicking on this little icon to add pages. And then I get this menu that asks me how many pages I want. So let's say I want 3, for example. And it's asking me about the master page. At this stage, I'll just leave it as none because we don't have one yet. So I'm going to press OK, and it makes 3 pages. I find this nicer in InDesign when I can just click on this little plus button on the bottom, and then I can spam add new pages. So now that we have the pages, let's create a master page, which I'm aware I should do first, but again, my channel, go away. No, I mean, don't. Please watch the video. Anyway, so to create a master page, I will have to click on this icon. And for some reason in this one, it asks me the size of the page. It should already know this, but don't know why, but it's asking me for the size of the page and the dimensions. I'm just going to leave it as it is and press OK. And now we have a master page. So any element that we add here will be repeated across any page that we assign. In this one, I'll just create this very interesting line, and I'm going to make it kind of rounded corners and increase it so it looks like a pill shape. And now I will just drag and drop this master into the pages that I want this master to be the master of, I guess. On InDesign, this uses parents. So these parents pages, when you double click them, I will then create this line here, and maybe this line on the adjacent one. And I'm going to make this rounded. And now it's automatically there. So I didn't need to go back and assign what follows a parent. It just assumed that this is what I want to do, which is, I think, it's kind of better. Okay, so now that we have the parents and we have the pages, I have this image that, again, it's made by Midjourney, and I want to put them here and kind of separate them out into little circles. So what I'm going to do first is create the circle that I want. Maybe it's going to be this big. And this circle has an X inside it, which means it's just a picture frame. So the picture frame tool on Affinity allows you to make very easy circular picture frames that you can then drag and drop images onto. On InDesign, it's the same thing. There's the rectangle frame or the ellipse frame or the polygon frame. So again, I'm going to try to create a circular one. And now I have empty circles on both Affinity and Adobe. Now I want to drag and drop the image that I want onto here. And on InDesign, if you click on the cursor here, and you get this circle in the middle. And this circle just moves the image within the frame. This blue frame moves the actual image with the frame, but this circle in the middle creates this orange frame in which you can actually move around the images that you have inside the actual image, the original one. And then to make that bigger and smaller, you have to click once and then kind of guess. It's not the most intuitive. On Affinity, I will again drag and drop. And this time on Affinity, you can see in the middle, it's not this kind of weird circle that you can click and hold. You get this kind of D-pad looking shape and a slider on the bottom. This D-pad moves the image inside the frame, but this slider gives you an ability to zoom. If you max it out, you can try again and it will zoom even further. So I find this a lot cleaner and easier to use. And also when you move, it gives you kind of a highlight of that image. So I'm going to use it to make it sit like this, basically. So now to actually have the 9 images, I will replicate this 9 times. And I'm going to just move around between the images on each one. I'll do the same thing for InDesign. And on InDesign, I'm finding that it takes much longer because I don't get that preview of how the image is looking like behind that orange frame. So I'm kind of just guessing where the image is. Anyway, so now I have it for both. Now, if you want to add text, InDesign's power lies in paragraph styles, which you can find here, and character styles, which you can find here, with which you can add a style to match a paragraph or the characters themselves. So in character styles, you can assign things like character formats, advanced character formats, or change the color. And on the paragraph styles, you can adjust so many things like indentations, hyphenations, justifications, or even character formats. You can do the same thing here in Affinity, where you can go to text, text styles, and create paragraph styles. It also gives you very similar options to those of Adobe: indentations, hyphenations, justifications, and character formats. So for example, I want to create a paragraph style with the font family being SF Mono, and I want the color of it here to be the draftish olive. I'm going to press OK. And now if I add text, and as I'm pressing the text, I can switch it to, for example, the style, which I could have given it a name. And now, as you can see, typing in the draftish olive, and it's writing in SF Mono. So I'm going to say, this is a portfolio. And then I'm going to make this bigger. And maybe make it bold. Very easy and very simple to use. Moving to InDesign, I'm going to do the same thing when I'm going to create a paragraph style and call it test paragraph style. And I'm going to change the font family to SF Mono. So for this one, I'm going to have to leave it the way it is, and then I'm going to change the colors after the fact. So I'm going to create a new text, make the box for it. I'm going to say, this is a portfolio, and it's using, if I can type, and this is using the SF Mono. And now I can change the color of this to be the draftish olive. And now I can make this bigger or smaller, how I'd like. And for this one, to make it bold, I need to click on where it says regular and make it bold. So again, very simple and very easy to use, but slightly more clicks than that of Affinity, which I found more intuitive and just more fun to use. I would say for this round, both are tied. Affinity has some nicer UI elements for photos, but equally, Adobe has some good controls that we all got used to. They both work well, I don't know. Just maybe like Affinity a bit more. Okay, so Affinity has one more workspace, and it's called Canva AI. This is only enabled if you have the Canva Pro subscription, or any form of a subscription that gives you access to Canva AI. This has some good features: generative expand tool, generative fill tool, generative edit tool, portrait blur tool, portrait lighting tool, colorize tool, super resolution tool, and select sample depth tool. Lots of stuff. Now, the reason why I left the gaps on the right or left is to try out this AI tools in both software. So I'm going to try to use the generative expand tool, but first let's use it in Photoshop. So I'm going to open up again this Photoshop file, and I'm aware this is also there on Illustrator. I'm going to select the layer of the building and then select the empty bit, and I'm going to say generative fill, expand the building. So let's see what it comes up with. And after like a solid maybe minute and a half of working, I now have these three options, which maybe does the job, I don't know. I'm going to also try to do the same on this side. I'm going to say expand, and oh my days. What the? What even is this? Why would you do this? I guess this one makes most sense, but I mean, just looking at the edges and looking at it, that is awful. Now, let's try the same with Affinity. So I'm going to use the generative fill here, and I'm going to highlight this selected area. And I'm going to say, expand the building. It also asks you to create however many images you want. I'm going to kind of be very fair and do the same as what Adobe does, which are 3 different iterations. I'm going to click on apply. I'm going to think about it now. And wow, that actually, oh, so these look so much better than those in Adobe. At least the blending between the old and the new. In here you can see it's almost perfect on the bottom, but not as good maybe on some areas. But I would say this works generally so much better than it does in Adobe. Let's try it on this left side here. So I'm going to select this area. I'm going to say expand. This is when it didn't work so well in Photoshop. So let's see how well Canva AI does, which by the way did so much better in the first one in terms of speed. So it did it in almost a third of the time that Adobe took to make that awful thing in its generative expand. And it kind of falls flat. I think it just thinks that I'm asking for it to write the word expand, which it did a better job at writing the word or using AI to actually write words. Maybe this works well if the building is called expand. So I'm just going to leave that there. I'm also going to use generative fill to maybe add figures. Add figures standing here. I'm going to ask it for 3 variations. I'm going to copy this, and then as this is working, I'm going to ask Photoshop for the exact same thing. So in here, I want you to add figures standing here. They're both working ahead. And the figures here kind of try to mimic the shape of the building or the atmosphere of the building. But oh my days, what even is this? This is guy taking pictures. I think that one is actually the most maybe fitting with the style of my image, but this one is just awful. This one is kind of better though, so I'm going to use this one. For Adobe, here we have 2 rows. I don't know why they can't just make normal people. Oh my, what even is this? Oh, come on. And the last thing which I'm going to add is kind of birds here maybe. I'm going to say a flock of birds. This is giving me PTSD from my previous video. A flock of birds. Okay, so here are the results. The flock of birds that I got from Photoshop are 2 out of 3 are actually acceptable. I'm going to use the third one because that looks the most maybe realistic. Only thing though, it doesn't create it as a PNG, it kind of creates it with a background, so I can just put them here without having to remove the yellow. But again, acceptable results. Affinity though, it's a bit of a different story. I did get a flock of birds, which is kind of just a repeated one bird, but then the other 2 are just not what I asked for. Even though I kind of like this one as kind of like a UFO. Canva AI can do more things, like colorizing images or maybe making things snow or increasing resolution. I will showcase them all in a future video and test them out. For AI features, they're kind of both a hit or miss. I found slight more consistency when it comes to expanding the actual building with Canva, but other things like the flock of birds actually lost against Adobe. So they kind of both have a lot of work to do. However, it's more important for Canva Affinity to get this right, because it's the only way they can actually monetize Affinity Studio. So, after spending a frankly unhealthy number of hours poking, prodding, and emotionally bullying these pieces of software, I think I came up to a conclusion. Affinity Studio is not the free alternative we have at home for Adobe. It's a genuine clever rethink for how creative software should feel. 1 app, 3 workspaces, no ritualistic file juggling between programs, no panic attacks over missing links, and no, oh my creative cloud wants to update for the 47th time this week moments. Adobe still has its muscles. There are decades of refinements here, from the delightfully squiggly curvature tool in Illustrator to the very powerful InDesign interface. Adobe still got it. But for the first time in ages, there's something that isn't trying to just be another Adobe. It's trying to outgrow the entire Adobe mindset, and that's new. That brings a whole entire new energy that we didn't have before, and that makes Affinity Studio feel liberating. It's not perfect, it's not omnipotent, and it won't tuck you in bed at night and whisper sweet Pantone colors into your ears. Yet, it's shockingly capable. thoughtfully designed, and this part still blows my mind, completely free. And when you sprinkle this choppy AI sauce on top, suddenly the Adobe Killer rhetoric feels less like a dramatic statement and a little bit like foreshadowing. So whether you're a designer who's been kept hostage by a subscription, a student who can't justify selling a kidney for Creative Cloud, or someone who just loves an underdog story, Affinity Studio is absolutely worth your time. I'll be diving deeper into the quirks of AI in our next video. Until then, keep designing, keep experimenting, and try to not anger Freddy. He's sensitive.